Hi, I'm Leilani for Performance Serial, and today we're going to be rebuilding this customer's turbine. This rebuild covers most Kifco turbine-powered B-Series like the T280 and the T180 and more. So let's get to it. First, we put the turbine in our 4-inch vise. Then we sprayed some lime water to remove any mineral deposits and rust. You can use any similar solution like CLR, mineral, and rust remover. We let this soak for a little while. This will make the cover easier to remove. Then we use a flathead screwdriver to remove the retaining ring that holds the cover in place. Since this customer sent this turbine for us to rebuild, it did not have the discharge elbow, which we normally use to help us remove the cover. So instead we attached some heavy-duty brackets with a 3/8 bolt and used our 2-pound slide hammer to pull the cover off. Then we used a 9/16 socket on our cordless impactor to remove the bolt that holds our impeller onto the shaft. We removed the washer, then sprayed the impeller and shaft with some PB Blaster and let that soak a while. Then we came back with a pair of pliers and a screwdriver and gently worked the impeller off of the shaft. We noted this impeller has some wear on the front of it from scraping against the cover when the bearing failed. As you can see, the outer part of the mechanical seal and spring are broken, which has caused quite a bit of wear on our shaft, which we can show after we remove the shaft. The shoulder and race of our bearing have broke, so we snipped them off the shaft just to get them out of our way. We didn't catch it on video, but we removed the small set screw holding the pulley on with an Allen key. Then we attached a 3-jaw puller to remove the pulley. Then we used our snap ring pliers to remove the inner retaining ring that holds the bearing and the shaft in place. Back at the front of the turbine housing, we removed the rest of the ceramic seal. Since this shaft was damaged and we were going to replace it, we used our mini sludge to knock it out of the back of the housing. If you are reusing your shaft, we recommend using a wood block to knock the shaft out of the back of the housing instead. Once again, we sprayed more lime away and let it soak a bit to help dissolve any minerals or rust. As you can see, the bearing is completely destroyed and the spring of the mechanical seal has worn down the shaft. These bearings fail when the mechanical seal fails and water enters the bearing housing. With our new shaft in the vise, we used a deep well 16mm socket to gently and evenly push the bearing under the shaft until it fully seated. I gave the bearing a quick spin to make sure it spun freely and the inner ring did not spin on the shaft. Then I used my snap ring pliers to place a small outer retaining ring into the groove on the shaft to hold the bearing in place. I used a nylon brush to clean out the area of the housing that holds the inner part of our mechanical seal. It is very important when handling the 2-part mechanical seal to wear gloves, as oil from hands will cause the mechanical seal to leak. Before replacing the mechanical seal, I removed the main housing O-ring and replaced it with a new one, making sure that it was properly seated. I used a little dish soap to make the inner part of the mechanical seal fit into the housing with very little effort. I also made sure this seal was properly seated. Then I took our shaft with the new bearing and placed it through the back of the housing and used my rubber mallet to gently drive the shaft into the housing until this too was, you guessed it, fully seated. Then I took my snap ring pliers and installed the inner retaining ring into the groove in the housing. Then I checked to make sure that the shaft had no excessive play. I also gave the shaft a quick spin to make sure it was spinning freely. Then I placed the long key in the slot and used an Allen key to tighten the set screw. Just a quick note, you may need to adjust this pulley to line up with the gearbox on your water-reel when you go to reinstall this turbine. Then we placed the second part of our mechanical seal with the ceramic portion facing in towards the first part of the mechanical seal already in the housing. Then we placed our key and installed our new impeller aligned with the key, followed by our washer and our nut. Then we used a socket to secure our turbine, being careful not to over-tighten and crack the impeller. We put our turbine housing cover back on and used a rubber mallet to tap it into place. It wasn't fully seated, so we gently used a screwdriver to ensure the cover cleared the retaining ring groove. Once the cover was on, we placed our retaining ring in the groove on the housing. This holds the cover on. Then we gave our pulley a spin to make sure that the shaft spun freely and the impeller was not scraping on the turbine cover. Then we replaced this O-ring on the front cover and put some painter's tape on it as we are shipping it to our customer. We also replaced this O-ring on the back of the housing. Then we removed this filter cap so we could check the filter screen for any debris or mineral buildup. We also replaced the O-ring on the filter cap and placed it back in the turbine housing. Just a quick note, these are shoulder bolts and you won't need to tighten or loosen to take this off. Place this O-ring on the other side of the discharge tube and place some painter's tape to hold it in place for shipping. Then we unbolted the turbine nozzle cap and removed the O-ring and cleaned out the groove. We placed the O-ring in the groove, making sure it was seated properly. Then we bolted the nozzle cap, being careful not to over-tighten the bolts and crack the flange on the housing. We didn't have this inlet O-ring in stock for the video, but we are definitely going to replace it when it arrives. Thanks for watching our Kifco B-Series turbine repair video. Keep an eye out for more Kifco repair videos.